Washington slows before it admits anything is wrong, not in headlines, not in speeches, first in wiring, in power grids, in the thin spaces between static and silence. At 6:14 a.m., the lights in the Hart Building flicker for 12 seconds. To most people, that is nothing. A glitch, a shrug, an invisible tremor swallowed by the morning. To the people who watch this city from the inside, 12 seconds is a sentence. Across the river, in a restricted server room with no windows, a single terminal logs a quiet event. Directive 17, preliminary trigger. No alarm, no sound, just a line of text sliding into existence, then locking itself behind layers of clearance. Directive 17 belongs to an older skeleton of federal power, a protocol that was never formally retired, only folded into places where nobody is supposed to look. It does not wake for clerical errors. It does not move for ordinary breaches. When Directive 17 stirs, something large is shifting under the floor. CIA Director William J. Berns reads the alert alone in a townhouse that pretends to be ordinary. The tablet glows for a moment in his hand. He does not swear. He does not sigh. He simply studies the code on the screen as if recognizing an old, unwelcome handwriting. Then he closes it. No calls, no messages, no visible reaction. He sits in the dark for 17 counted seconds, eyes open, breath steady, measuring out a rhythm he has rehearsed in his head for years. Across town, the day begins acting like any other. Motorcades roll, staffers hurry, reporters rehearse questions they will never get to ask. But three people move differently. Cass Petrell arrives at the Hart Building with a crimson folder pressed flat under her arm. She does not sign in at the front desk. Her clearance walks her past the line. Dirk Durbin is already upstairs in a borrowed office with the blinds half closed, scrolling through a printout of system logs for the 50th time and still circling the same empty space. Alicia Warren walks the corridor toward room 9B41, heels slow, shoulders square, a controlled calm that makes security officers look away. Room 9B41 is not on any public map. It is the kind of room that exists only in blueprints. Nobody files and budgets, nobody debates. Today it has one purpose: to hold a closed session that does not officially take place about 3 minutes of digital time that should not be missing. Not missing files, not missing content, missing metadata, the bones of the truth. For 3 minutes, there is no record of who entered a restricted directory, what they saw, what they moved, or why William J. Berns's access key was used when he was supposed to be somewhere else. Durbin spent 4 nights chasing that gap. Every path looped back to the same blank. Petrell requested the emergency session. Warren approved it in under a minute. Outside, the city keeps its rituals. Inside, the building has already chosen a side. When Berns finally steps through the side entrance, he is unaccompanied. No motorcade, no visible escort, just a man whose presence makes hallways quieter 3 seconds before he appears. He passes security without stopping. No pat-down, no scanner. Only a brief nod between people who have run out of questions they are allowed to ask. The director does not look up at the cameras. He has lived under lenses his entire career. He turns once, then again, down corridors that narrow into something less like architecture and more like intent. Room 9B41 waits at the end, its door unmarked, its handle dull from very deliberate use. On the other side, a table, 3 chairs, 3 folders, and a question that has already decided it does not want the answer Berns is about to give. The city breathes in. Directive 17 is awake. Washington just hasn't admitted it yet. The room meets Berns with silence. No microphones are visible, but everyone in it has spent a career assuming they are never alone. Cass Petrell sits at the center of the table, the crimson folder laid in front of her, parallel to the edge, aligned with a kind of precision that usually belongs to weapons. On her right, Dirk Durbin, hands resting on a stack of printouts, white pages softened at the edges from too much revisiting. On her left, Elijah Warren, a legal pad untouched, pen still capped, as if she already knows there will be nothing here she is allowed to write down. Berns does not sit right away. He closes the door himself, checks the latch once, lets the weight of the room settle. Then he sits, back straight, palms flat on the table, as if he were the one convening the session. No introductions, no small talk. Everyone knows who everyone is. That is why this room exists. Petrel begins. "Director Berns," she says, "we are here about an irregularity in the access logs for Directory 740. Durbin slides the first document toward him. Rows of timestamps, user IDs, clearance levels. In the middle of the grid, like a tooth pulled from bone, is the gap. 3 minutes, no entries, no exits, nothing, except for one remnant, a half-corrupted line showing the use of an access key assigned to William J. Berns. During this interval, Durbin says, your credentials were active inside the directory. He waits. Berns studies the page without picking it up. Keys can be duplicated, he answers. Not a denial, a diversion. Warren speaks. No duplication event was logged, she says. No request, no override, no maintenance exception. Then the log is incomplete, Berns replies. There is a pause, small in seconds, large in consequence. Petrel places a second printout on the table, the director's official schedule, calls, briefings, movements, every minute accounted for except the 3 that matter. Where were you, she asks, between 0941 and 0944? Berns lets the question hang. Elsewhere, he says. A non-location. A refusal dressed as geography. The discrepancy is not isolated, Warren says. This is the second event in 8 years involving your credentials and erased metadata. Her tone is even, her meaning is not. Patterns concern us, she adds. Berns looks at each of them in turn. What concerns you, he says, is not the pattern. It is what you would be forced to do if you admitted you see one. The crimson folder is still closed. When metadata disappears, Petrel says, oversight becomes a rumor. She opens it. Inside, screenshots of log fragments, timestamp anomalies, internal routes that existed for seconds before erasing themselves. We need an explanation on the record, she says. Berns closes the folder again with a single, controlled motion. Then he gives them 4 words instead of an answer. Directive 17 is active, he says. The air in the room changes. Durbin's hands still. Warren's shoulders lock. Petrel's jaw tightens. Everyone here knows that name. Directive 17 is not a policy or a guideline or a request. It is a protocol that, once invoked, moves the conversation out of their jurisdiction and into a part of the architecture they are not cleared to describe. The committee has questions. The city has rules. Directive 17 decides which questions are never officially asked. For a moment, nobody in room 9B41 knows what to do with the words. Directive 17 is active. They land softly. They do not need volume. They carry history instead. Cass Petrel has read about the protocol only in fragments, inside training binders that pretended it was a theoretical relic, a last resort authority structure for situations too explosive to survive ordinary oversight. She never expected to hear it invoked in her presence. She never expected it to have a voice. Director, she says slowly, Directive 17 has not been used in any way you are cleared to discuss, Berns cuts in. It is not aggression, it is a correction. Durbin feels the air thicken. His eyes travel to the corners of the ceiling, mapping where microphones would be if the room followed the usual design. He doesn't see them, which somehow makes everything worse. Activation of that protocol, Warren says carefully, would require signatures from offices that have not been informed about this session. You assume they were not informed, Berns replies. You assume you would be told if they were. He leans back, not relaxed, but settled, like a stone deciding where it will rest. Directive 17 exists, he continues, for events in which the full disclosure you believe you want would cause more damage than the violation you are trying to investigate. That is not your determination to make, Petrel says. The charter, Berns interrupts, was written for a quieter age. You are attempting to apply open court logic to a closed-circuit reality. He taps the closed crimson folder once with 2 fingers. You see 3 missing minutes, he says. I see a breach that did not become a catastrophe because certain structures moved faster than your logs. He lets the implication hang. Something happened, something large, something they will not be allowed to name. And you decided, Warren says, to erase the traces. Berns looks at her longer than necessary. I decided, he answers, to confine them. By altering metadata, she says. By placing the event, he replies, under a protocol whose very existence prevents you from forcing me to lay the details on this table where neither of us could control what they might set in motion. The room has stopped breathing. Even the fluorescent lights seem quieter. Durbin flips through his stack of logs as if he might find a version of them that does not end with those 4 words. What exactly, he asks, happened inside Directory 740 during those 3 minutes? Berns studies him as one might study a junior officer walking toward a minefield with a curious expression. If Directive 17 is active, he says, then the only truthful answer I can give you within the boundaries of the law is this, something that must not be detailed at this level of clearance. He doesn't blink when he says it. Petrel feels the structure of her authority bending. Every rule she enforces depends on the assumption that there is no room above the rules where people like Berns can stand and look down. Director, she says, invocation of that protocol cannot retroactively legalize unauthorized access. No, Berns agrees, but it can redefine what unauthorized means. He folds his hands. You are trying, he says, to audit a firebreak, as if it were an arson. For a moment, the image disorients them. Then the anger returns. Warren keeps her voice even. Are you refusing to answer further questions on the record? On the contrary, Berns says, I am answering you with the only classification this situation now permits. His gaze sharpens. Directive 17 is active, he repeats. That statement is, in itself, a complete answer and a legal wall. The room understands. The building understands. Somewhere beyond them, systems adjust to the new status. The session has not officially ended, but its future has. The next minutes do not belong to anyone. Procedurally, Cass Petrel is still the chair in this room. Legally, Alicia Warren still has authority to insist the session continue. Technically, Dirk Durbin still has standing to demand clarification. But in practice, all 3 of them are now moving inside a space Directive 17 has drawn around them like invisible glass. Petrel tries to step through it first. Director Berns, she says, this committee was constituted to oversee the use of intelligence authorities. We cannot fulfill that duty if you place your actions behind a protocol we are not allowed to question. Berns gives a small, almost sympathetic nod. That is the point, he says. Durbin hears something different in his tone, not triumph, not gloating, but the fatigue of someone who has had this argument before with people who did not walk away intact. Let me guess, Durbin says quietly. You want us to trust that whatever you did with those 3 minutes prevented something worse. Berns meets his gaze. No, he replies. I want you to accept that you are not in a position to evaluate what worse would have meant. There is a difference. Durbin feels it settle in his stomach. Warren uncaps her pen at last and writes a single line on her otherwise blank pad. Directive 17 invoked. Session contaminated. She does not know who will ever read it. She writes it anyway. Director, she says, we can adjourn this meeting. We can mark it as delayed. We can file the transcripts under restricted review. There will be no transcripts, Berns answers. Not of my words under this protocol. You do not control the record, Petrel says. Berns's expression does not change. Directive 17 does, he replies. The lights in the room seem to dim a fraction. It could be imagination. It usually isn't. Somewhere down the hall, an unseen process acknowledges the invocation. Recording systems are placed in standby. Auto-transcription queues are purged. File tags update from oversight to a designation only a handful of terminals recognize. The architecture is moving without them. Durbin realizes that for the last minute, no one has written anything except Warren's single line. "How many times," he asks, "have you invoked it?" Berns takes a measured breath. "You are not cleared to know," he says. "That isn't a number," Durbin replies. "It is," Berns says, "the only answer you can legally receive without making this room a crime scene of its own." Silence again. This time, it feels less like absence and more like a verdict. Petrel straightens the documents in front of her. This is what people do when they are trying to reassert control over a space that no longer belongs to them. "Then this session," she says, "is at an impasse." "No," Berns corrects her gently. "This session is concluded. It simply will not be recorded as having reached that point. You don't have the authority to terminate. Directive 17 does," he says once more, and he pushes his chair back. The sound of the legs against the floor is louder than it should be. Power has weight. When it moves, rooms feel it. Berns stands. Petrel does not formally dismiss him. Warren does not invoke any clause to hold him. Durbin does not call for security. They all know the same thing. None of those actions would matter while that protocol is running. He walks to the door at the same unhurried pace with which he entered. Hand on the handle, he pauses, not for drama, but for clarity. "You are not the first committee," he says, "to discover that there are layers above the ones you were taught to trust." He does not wait for a response. The door opens. Light from the corridor spills in, thin and indifferent. Then he is gone. The latch clicks shut behind him, soft, final. For several seconds, the three of them sit in the adjusted quiet, each one taking inventory of what has just been taken from them. Authority, narrative, ownership of the facts. Outside room 9, B41, the building returns to its routine hum. Inside, the session is over. The real story has been moved to a place none of them are cleared to follow. Washington does not react to crises loudly. It reacts through systems. Small shifts, subtle delays, a new hesitation in a hallway that never used to hesitate. When Berns leaves room 9B41, the building behaves as if nothing has happened. But the architecture knows better. Somewhere beneath the floors, servers handshake with new permissions. Logs reroute, access points turn opaque. The machinery of secrecy moves the way tides move, not visibly, but with force that is impossible to stop. Inside the closed room, Petrel finally exhales. She looks older in the silence, as though Directive 17 has placed weight on her shoulders that belongs to someone far above her pay grade. "Is anyone going to say it?" Durbin asks. His voice is calm, the calm that arrives when a person realizes their anger has nowhere to go. Warren closes her notebook. Her one written line feels insufficient for what the last hour has become. "This session," she says, "is compromised." "That's an understatement," Durbin replies. He shut down oversight with 4 words. "No," Petrel says. "He redirected oversight to a place we can't see." She picks up the crimson folder and flips through the distorted fragments again. Every screenshot is a ghost. Not empty, but altered, just enough to deny meaning. "Look at this," she says. "These log routes. They reassign and self-delete in patterns we don't use." Durbin leans in. "This isn't concealment," he says. "This is containment." Warren raises her eyes. "That's worse." Petrel nods slowly. "If the system is quarantining the event instead of erasing it, that means whatever happened is still active somewhere." "And Berns is letting it run," Durbin says. No one argues. A soft vibration rattles the metal edge of the table. Durbin checks his phone. A new notice. Access privileges downgraded. Temporary security protocol alignment. He shows it silently. Warren checks hers. Same message. Petrel looks at the door as if expecting someone to enter, but no one is coming. This is the building adjusting to him, she says. Not us. She closes the crimson folder. We file a motion. We escalate. We appeal to the oversight board. Durbin shakes his head. You don't escalate past Directive 17. There is nowhere past it. There has to be, she insists. There isn't, he repeats. Silence returns, the kind that fills a room after a long, failed argument. Slowly, Warren stands. We need to consider the possibility that the 3 missing minutes were not a breach. Petrel watches her. Then what were they? Warren chooses her words carefully. An intervention. Durbin frowns. By whom? Warren looks at the door Berns walked through. If Directive 17 is active, she says, the answer is not meant to be known at our level. Petrel sits back, realizing the shape of the truth has shifted beyond their reach. Then what do we do now? She asks. Nothing, Warren says, and that's the part they count on. For several seconds, none of them moves. The room is no longer a meeting space. It is a boundary. What lies beyond it belongs to the protocol. The corridor outside room 9B41 is painfully ordinary. Fluorescent lights, industrial carpet, a framed evacuation map nobody has ever read. Yet as Berns walks through it, the building feels altered. Every sensor, every camera, every passive system seems to adjust its rhythm to him. He does not rush. Rushing implies fear. Berns is not afraid. He is irritated. He turns left then right, moving through routes people in his position are not supposed to know instinctively. 2 security officers step aside without being asked. The look in their eyes is not deference. It is recognition. A man wrapped in a protocol they do not dare question. He passes a glass wall overlooking the central atrium. Staffers walk below carrying folders, checking phones, laughing at nothing important. None of them knows that the temperature of the building has shifted by a fraction because one protocol woke up. None of them knows the city is now in a holding pattern. Berns reaches a restricted elevator that requires dual authentication. He presents none. The doors open anyway. Inside the descending silence, he closes his eyes. He is not replaying the session. He is calculating timelines. Directive 17 buys time. But not much. He steps out into a service-level hallway lined with concrete and exposed wiring, utility corridors, old infrastructure, places forgotten in renovations because nobody wants to admit how much the city still relies on things it refuses to remember. A man in a gray maintenance uniform passes him. No greeting, no glance. But Berns knows the man is not maintenance. He continues walking. At the far end of the hallway, a steel door waits, unmarked, unwelcoming. He enters a room lit by a single lamp, a metal desk, a closed terminal, a stack of sealed envelopes. This is where people like Berns come when the architecture grows dangerous. He places the crimson folder on the desk, not the committee's folder, his, a different one, a thicker one. Its label is the same, access denied. He unlocks the terminal. A screen appears, black background, white cursor, no menu, no interface, just a line waiting for a command. He types, status query, D17 AUX. The system responds instantly. Auxiliary process still active. Containment zone sealed. Further intervention not advised. Berns leans back. The committee thinks the missing 3 minutes hold an answer. They don't. They hold a warning. He closes the terminal and seals the room behind him. Upstairs, the committee debates their next procedural move, but Berns already knows. Their moves no longer matter. Directive 17 has entered its next phase, and Washington, loud, proud, self-assured Washington, is about to learn what a protocol sounds like when it breathes. Washington does not explode when something goes wrong. It tightens, it narrows, it becomes a throat that refuses to swallow. By mid-afternoon, the Hart Building moves with a strange, barely detectable tension. Elevators pause for a half-second longer. Doors take a fraction more time to close. Badges that always beep on first scan now require a second. People notice these things, but they do not name them. Naming them means admitting the system is reacting to something they were not told about. Petrel, Durbin, and Warren step back into the public corridors, each of them carrying the shape of the session in the stiffness of their posture. What happened in room 9B41 has followed them outward. Petrel moves quickly, as if speed alone can outrun the protocol pressing against her authority. She heads to a communications terminal, trying to file a procedural notice before the window closes. It closes before she reaches the door. A message appears on the glass display. Temporary hold. Review required. She tries a second terminal. Same message. Third. Same. The building is placing a freeze on anything connected to the session. Durbin walks beside her, thumb rubbing the edge of the printouts he refuses to let go of. "This isn't oversight," he mutters. "This is a blackout." Warren falls behind them, watching office doors, reading faces of passing staffers, trying to assess how far the disruption has spread. She sees the signs. Clusters of aides whispering, unusual badge checks, a senior official staring at his phone as though it has betrayed him. Everywhere she looks, the machinery is adjusting to an instruction none of them received. She catches up to the others. "We need to leave the building," she says quietly, before it decides our presence is part of the event. The three push through the side exit and emerge into the cold air. Washington's sunlight is harsh, too bright, too honest. A city that hides its secrets indoors does not like being seen this clearly. "This isn't over," Petrel says. Durbin laughs once, a short, humorless breath. It was over when he said those 4 words. Warren doesn't speak. She watches the windows above them, counting floors, mapping lines of sight. "Directive 17 isn't just a shield," she says finally. "It's a funnel. It pushes everything downward into places we can't see." Durbin looks at her. "So what do? We wait," she says. "Something this big always creates a second signal, a pressure wave." Petrel shakes her head. "We can't build a report on pressure waves." "We're not building a report," Warren replies. "We're building an understanding of what we're really up against." They stand on the steps, like 3 pieces of evidence the building forgot to file. A black SUV pulls to the curb. Not for them, not officially. But the windows are tinted wrong, too thick, too deliberate. Durbin takes one slow step back. "That's not ours," he says. Warren nods. "It's someone else's." Petrel remains still, jaw set, hands at her sides. "Do you think Berns sent it?" she asks. Warren considers the question carefully. "No," she answers. "If he wanted us gone, we wouldn't see the car arrive." The SUV waits, silent, idle, watching. The city is rearranging its pieces, and they are standing in the open. The SUV eventually pulls away, unhurried, leaving only the echo of its presence behind. Warren exhales slowly and begins walking toward the sidewalk, forcing the others to follow. "We need distance," she says, "physical and operational. No calls, no messages, no drafts. We talk only in person until we understand how far the protocol reaches." Durbin looks shaken, not afraid, just destabilized. "What if the missing 3 minutes weren't a breach or an intervention?" he says. "What if they were a test?" Warren stops. Her eyes sharpen. "That," she says, "is the first useful thought you've had today." Petrel steps forward. "A test of what?" Warren answers, without turning. "Capacity, reaction time, containment, effectiveness, and whether the director still has the authority to invoke a protocol the system pretends doesn't exist." Petrel swallows hard. "You think those 3 minutes were engineered?" "I think," Warren replies, "that the city changes shape only when something with a bigger footprint steps into it." She starts walking again, this time with urgency. Meanwhile, several blocks away, William J. Berns exits a service corridor through an unmarked door and steps into the chill of late afternoon. Pedestrians move around him without recognition. He is invisible the way power enjoys being invisible. Ordinary on the surface, catastrophic underneath. His phone vibrates once. He reads the message. A single line. Auxiliary process, complete, holding state stable. He closes the device, expression unchanged. Directive 17's containment is holding for now. But containment is never the end. It is the beginning before the beginning. Berns walks toward a waiting sedan. Not an official vehicle, not assigned, just present. He gets in. The door shuts. The city continues, pretending it has not been bent out of its natural angle. Back near the Hart Building, Petrel stops on the sidewalk. "We have to file something," she insists. "We can't let this disappear." "It already disappeared," Durbin says. "We're the only people who remember it happened." Warren turns to them, finally allowing emotion into her voice. Not fear, not frustration, but clarity. "Listen to me," she says. "What happened today wasn't an oversight failure. It was a jurisdiction shift. The moment Directive 17 was invoked, the event moved into a layer of government we're not meant to define." Petrel looks defeated. "So we walk away." "No," Warren says. "We watch." Durbin looks between them. Watch for what? Warren's eyes settle on the skyline, the glass, the steel, the invisible corridors of authority that cross the city like veins. "For the moment," she says, "when whatever happened in those 3 minutes refuses to stay contained." She puts her hands in her coat pockets and steps into the crosswalk. Petrel follows, Durbin behind her. The city swallows them slowly. 3 shadows disappearing into a place that no longer answers to them. Across town, William J. Berns's sedan turns onto a restricted access road that no map acknowledges, and beneath the surface, Directive 17 continues in its silent cycle, unseen, unquestioned, untouchable. The crisis is not over. It has only found a deeper place to breathe.